Do these 7 things in your life and make them a habit with your teenage kids, especially if they've passed that and they become adults forever. Number 1, try to be a listener, parents. Listen to your child without judgment. And for example, some children, some teenagers, they may have gone up to no good, and suddenly you'll find that they lock themselves up in their room. One minute they've been out talking to family, and the next minute they just change. They isolate themselves, they go into the room, they close the door, and suddenly you think something's going on, right? Some young people say to me, my parents mistreat me. Do I continue to show them that kindness? They don't deserve it. Some young people say it not knowing what they're saying really. They're saying they don't deserve it maybe from their perspective. So for example, some young people might say, well, if my parents go along this way, that means I'm happy with them. But if they don't go along that way, for example, you want something and it doesn't go your way, then suddenly we might think that our parents are bad to us. So please be careful and analyze and think. Are they really being bad to you? Or are you just being a person who is thinking more about your needs and forgetting their needs? Number 2, there are parents who are truly oppressive and they are horrible to their children. They exist and we hear about them night and day. Some of them use this verse like a guillotine and a sword on their children, as if to say that I own you and everything about you and I get to control everything about you. Some of them use dua and say, if you don't do this or if that happens and I'm not happy with you, I beseech Allah to be angry with you till the end of time. Some of them use that as a weapon, and some of them do go further into even more horrendous situations. But they are, my dear brothers and sisters, the exceptions. The norm of parents is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, even if you disagree with them, even if they tell you to do something that's harsh and hard, even if sometimes you don't have to obey them, here's the thing. You always have to be respectful to them. Like no matter what. Some say, well, they're not respectful to me. I say, your parents have a special place. Even if they are disrespectful to their own children, you don't do the same. You need to break that cycle and not be that same person, because one day when you have children and they watch you the way that you treat your parents, they're going to treat you the same way you treated their grandparents. Mark my words. You need to break that cycle and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given both your parents and you a guidance and a path. And look at this verse, what it's saying. Allah is saying to you, all of you are going to return to me. And Allah is saying, I am going to question both your parents and I'm going to question the children. Each one, did you fulfill the duty and did you look after the trust which I gave you? O parents, did you look after those children that I gave you temporarily? They're mine. Allah is saying they're mine. You don't own them. I gave them to you as a trust, as a gift, and I gave you authority over them to a certain degree for a purpose, to raise them, to look after them, to teach them, to educate them, to teach them about Allah, to leave a beautiful generation behind. And if you do so, I will make them an intercessor for you on the day of judgment, and because of them you will enter paradise. Or did you not fulfill that trust? Did you break it? Did you abuse your rights? Did you use the verses of the Quran? Same with the children. How did you treat your parents? Allah is going to say, I made them get weaker and older, and you saw that before your eyes. They got sick, they got older, they got feeble, you got stronger, you became more independent. And what did you do with that strength? Did you abuse it? Did you mistreat them? Or did you fulfill how I commanded you? Don't you think, brothers and sisters, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't know that there are families who go through struggles and that there are harsh parents and harsh children and all of that? Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still says to you, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. In this verse here, it's talking about disbelieving parents. And not only disbelieving parents, it's talking about kafir parents who are forcing their children to worship idols, forcing their children to swear at God, to swear at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to disbelieve in the Quran, to talk harshly about Islam. These are the types of parents Allah is talking about. This is abuse. Yet Allah is saying, just don't listen to them. Don't obey them. Don't go down that road. But the way you oppose them, you need to find a way to oppose them without crossing your boundaries. Oppose them respectfully. You know, brothers and sisters, something that I find among, because I've been a teacher for a while, and I find among teenagers, my students, something that we need to teach more often, and I hope inshallah some of you here can do courses like that, or among you who are teachers, to teach communication skills. Communication management and organizational skills. To be able to look past just myself and to put myself in someone else's shoes and be able to communicate in a way that I can get to them. I have this formula. It's called AATT. And it'll work in anything you do. Or I'm just going to give you this for free. You want to open up a business, you want to deal with customers, you want to deal with your parents, with your spouse, with your children. Always use it this way. If there's something that someone's complaining about or opposing you about, or showing harshness about it, number one, listen. Then number one, acknowledge. I understand what you're going through, and I can see that you're frustrated. Number two, I call it AA, I'll call it AV. So validate. AV, validate. Say, and I can only imagine how hard it feels. Mum, Dad, I understand, and it must be really hard if I was in your shoes. Or a parent says it to a child, say, Habibti, I understand, to a daughter, I understand what you're going through, and it must feel really hard. Then talk. Tell them the advice. And then when you tell them the advice, in the end, thank them. Thank them for listening. And always thank them to give you feedback. Brothers and sisters, wallahi, Ar-Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us a way of how to communicate, and you can really reach a person's heart if you can master that. Anybody. There's a book called How to Make Friends and Influence People. It teaches you how to win a person's heart. And subhanAllah, when I read it, written by a non-Muslim, it kinds of agrees with a lot of the sunnah and seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, the way the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to approach people. So there is a way to oppose people by still respecting them. My brothers and sisters, I've heard young people say, if my dad spends on me, it's his duty. My mum spends on me, it's her duty. Okay, what do you mean it's their duty? It means they brought me into this world, they've got to feed me, I owe them nothing. I didn't ask them to bring me into this world. Subhanallah. They forget that it is Allah who brought him into this world. They forget that it is not up to us who's going to be born and who's not. Some of us, we can't even have children. And they forget that they're going to be questioned by Allah, and this is a test for them. Your parents are a test. And they forget that one day they're going to get married and they're going to have kids, inshallah, and their kids are going to do the same to them. And they forget that their misery and their sadness and their issues in life is because they're distant from their parents and they're very selfish. What do you mean it's your duty? So a parent, yes, it's their duty, but who's going to stop them if they don't spend on you? They listen to Allah. The fact that they are obeying Allah, the fact that they are doing it out of love, the fact that they acknowledge that you're their child, that requires a reciprocation. They also have rights on us. So please don't speak to your parents that way, because the circle will happen again to you. My brothers and sisters, my advice as well to parents in dealing with your teenage children, please understand that they're still learning. Have mercy on them. Be compassionate towards them. And what I mean by that is not by giving them everything they want. No. Being compassionate to them is the following. Do these 7 things in your life and make them a habit with your teenage kids, especially if they pass that and they become adults forever. Number 1, try to be a listener, parents. Listen to your child without judgment. And for example, some children, some teenagers, they may have gone up to no good, and suddenly you'll find that they lock themselves up in their room. One minute they've been out talking to family, and then next minute they just change. They isolate themselves, they go into the room, they close the door, and suddenly you think something's going on, right? A parent has to understand that they are now going into the world and they're starting to become adults themselves. So obviously they're going to fall into some problems, but if they're not able to come to you as a parent, then you've got to re-evaluate how your relationship is with them. The most successful parents I have come across in my life are the ones who their children can come to talk to them about any problem. So once they do that, tell them, look, son, daughter, I'm here to listen. And wallahi, I will not judge you. Now parents some of them might get an anxiety attack and say, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. And if they tell me they're going to lose the plot, I say to you, listen, it is better for them to tell you about the problem now before it advances and gets even bigger later on when it's not going to be able to be dealt with. Let them talk to you now. There's a parent of mine who gave me this idea, a parent that I spoke to. He says he's got a daughter who was about 11, 12 years old. And whenever he agreed with his daughter, saying, listen, if there's anything sensitive we're going to talk about, we need a word between us. And then she goes, what's the word? He goes, let's say, for example, balloon. Balloon means we're in this vacuum and we're protected. So that means we can talk about anything without any judgment. And that worked tremendously because that child now grew up to know that there is a safety net, that they can talk to their parent without being judged, and so they can work on solutions, inshallah. Number two, show your teenagers interest, and your adult children, or especially as they're growing up, maybe 9, 10, 11 years old, show them how you are also interested in their hobbies. Don't belittle their hobbies. They're allowed to have games and hobbies and share it, even if you don't enjoy it. Number three, talk about their feelings and your feelings. Parents can talk about their vulnerabilities and talk about on a deeper level rather than just rules, instructions, consequences, school. When they come home, it's another school. You know, homes these days are two types. They're either totally neglectful or totally military. Another school, they come back home, another school. Or they go to school, come back, and it's neglectful on their iPads, on their audio visuals all night, no care. You've got to strike a balance. So what happens here is talk on a personal level. Walk together and talk on personal levels. And be vulnerable a little bit, oh parents, and you watch your children will start opening up, inshallah. Number four, acknowledge, validate, tell, and then thank. Acknowledge your children's feelings. Validate them. I see. Start like this, say, I see that this is upsetting you. Number two, I can understand how it's hurting you. The pain is, if I was in your place, I'll feel the same way. And say, look, I understand, Baba, I understand. And then number three, talk. Say, can I say a few words? I'd like to say, talk. This is on a deep level. Wallahi, if you have this on a weekly basis, inshallah, or whenever a problem happens, then subhanallah, your relationship with your children will only increase and they'll become better human beings, better Muslims, inshallah ta'ala. Number five, give them some space as they get older. You don't have to always hone into them, walking onto their room. Give them their privacy. They have a right to their privacy. Don't go to their phones without their permission, for example, unless you have a really serious concern, something that really is there. That's a different story in order to protect your children. But other than that, let them feel that they are, I'll tell you something. My brother and I, when we were about 18, 19 years old, I found out a hack with my dad. My dad had this curfew on us. He said, you have to come home at 8:30 p.m. Now that's pretty bad, because when you're out with your mates and it's 8:30 p.m. and then you go, oh, I've got to go home. You're an 18, 19-year-old and your mates are looking and thinking, are you all right, mate? You're still a baby? And then, it was quite sometimes very hard. So my brother and I would sort of stay a little bit longer, and then the phone call, we didn't have mobiles at that time, but so that's why we got away with it. And then the phone calls would go to like different parents' houses. And then when we got home, my brother and I would come in through the window and would try and tiptoe. And then every time I remember, one time came at night and I said, you go this way, I'll go that way. And then in the darkness of the dark, I hear my dad's voice, where were you? And then we just freeze. And then we start blaming each other. But my father was very good with us. He started explaining, look, it's okay, just keep connecting, because I fear for you, as you're going out, I need to feel that you're responsible. So I found a hack. Every time I'd go out, I'd find the phone, I'd call my parents and I'd say, I'm here, I'm with these friends, we're just having a good time, inshallah, we'll come back at this time. And I would stick to it exactly. Now my brother didn't do the same thing, right? So then as time went on, my father started to trust me outside, because I'm the person who will keep them sort of, knowing where we are. And then every time I went out, or my brother wanted to go out, my dad would say, you go out with your brother. You're not allowed to go out unless you're with your brother. So the idea is that you need to, as you get older, you got to show your parents that they can let go a little bit as well, and that they can trust you. So at the same time, parents, you let go a little bit and let them try the world by themselves. Agree together with rules in the house. And number seven, teach them what the boundaries are under your roof. I have a mother who once told me that her son's taking drugs, and every time she comes into the house, he brings in the drugs, he's got siblings, and I said to her, okay, what are you doing about it? She goes, I don't know what to do. The other day the dad wanted to call the police. I said, all right, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried speaking to organizations? Have you tried speaking to friends? Have you tried to place the rules? She says, we've done all of that. And now the son's doing it openly. I said, all right. In the end, after everything, I said, call the police. He said, but I can't put my son into this. I said, if you don't do that, your son is going to either lose his life, or he's going to get his siblings onto these drugs, or something worse is going to happen. So she did that. He ended up in prison for a little while, after a long time. Came out, they gave him rehab. We attached him to Muslim brothers in an organization, alhamdulillah. And after all that help, got married, and he settled his life, alhamdulillah. Sometimes parents do have to take strict measures under their